Hello and welcome to today's Facebook Live. I'm Heidi Wright and I'm the Practice and Policy Lead for England here at RPS. So we hear and we know how hard it is out there for pharmacists and their teams at the moment, and you're all doing amazing work, whatever sector of the profession you belong to. But it is an anxious time for a lot of us, worrying about work, our families, and life in general. It is really important that we look after ourselves as well as support each other through these difficult times. So today's webinar is focused on reducing anxiety. So anxiety is generally a feeling of unease, such as worry or fear, and it can be mild or severe. So everyone has feelings of anxiety at some point in their life. For example, you might feel worried about sitting an exam, particularly relevant at the moment for our professionally registered pharmacists, or you might be anxious about having a medical test or a job interview. But those feelings pass once the stressor, the thing causing the stress, disappears. So once the exam's been taken or the job interview is over. During times like these, feeling anxious can be perfectly normal. But some people find it hard to control their worries. Their feelings of anxiety are more constant and often affect their daily lives. So when you feel anxious, your body goes on high alert, looking for possible danger and activating your fight or flight responses. As a result, some common symptoms of anxiety include nervousness, restlessness, being tense, feelings of danger, panic or dread. So today I'm joined by Danielle, Jill, Jamie and Harpreet. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm just going to introduce you, and if it'd be great if you could just say a quick couple of words about today's topic. So I'm going to start off with Jill.
Oh, hi everyone, I'm Jill Cruickshank. I'm a community pharmacist and I also run my own coaching and development consultancy, Leading to Solutions, and have done for the last 14 years. And the reason anxiety is so important to me is because I have experienced anxiety, particularly work-related anxiety in the past. And also I think the more we talk about anxiety as individuals and as a profession, it will allow us to understand what the root causes are, how we can change the culture, and also how we can provide support to all of us.
Thanks very much, Jill. Moving on to Jamie.
Hi everybody. My name is Jamie Hayes. I'm a pharmacist and executive coach, qualified as an executive coach about 5 years ago now. Agree with everything that Jill just said as well. My coaching clients come from public and private sectors. And I suppose a constant is people come in worrying, wondering, with lots of self-talk. And so that's something that I've explored over the last 5 years or so.
Thanks, Jamie. And Harpreet?
Hi, I'm Harpreet Chana. I'm a pharmacist as well. I'm also a certified professional coach, and I set up the Mental Health Academy 2 years ago because of this very topic. 5 years ago, I struggled with stress and burnout whilst I was in a senior national position. And because I ignored the signs and symptoms, it became depression, and I got quite ill. Now, the root cause of this was anxiety. And so it's really key for me, that I see it now in all the pharmacist clients that I work with, that anxiety is the root cause of so many other mental health issues. And so it's really important that we start to, as Jill said, start looking at the root cause of this as to where this anxiety comes from. And what I do is work with corporates. I go in and do quite a lot of training around well-being, and I also coach clients one-to-one, and we look at how we can start to prevent mental health issues and mental illness, and dealing with anxiety really is at the heart of that. So this is a topic that I'm really passionate about.
Thank you, Harpreet. And last but not least, Danielle.
Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Hunt. I'm the Chief Executive of the independent charity Pharmacist Support. This is a subject really close to our heart because at the charity our mission is to champion the well-being of our pharmacy family. And as everybody's mentioned, anxiety does impact us. Personally, I've had an anxiety disorder and I know it's really difficult when you're in that situation. So at the charity we have been working really hard, particularly over the past year, to be starting that conversation. As others has mentioned, it's really important that we're really open and honest, because everybody faces anxiety at some point, and you know, there are ways we can help by focusing on our well-being to focus on reducing that feeling of anxiety. So really glad to be part of the conversation today.
Thank you all, and thanks very much. So I'm going to move on to some questions. So firstly, Harpreet, why does working in the pharmacy profession predispose us to anxiety, and what can we do about it?
Thanks, Heidi. I could probably talk for about a day on this topic, but as I only have a few minutes, I will try and be as concise as possible. There are many reasons why our profession, I believe our profession predisposes us to not just anxiety, but burnout as well as long-term stress. And part of that comes from the very nature of our job. So if we just stop for a second and think about what it is that we do as pharmacists, it is our job to check the accuracy of everybody else. We are the fail-safe before that medication reaches the patient. And so we have to make sure that whatever we're doing is accurate and what everybody else has done is accurate. So just by that very nature, and we are taught at university to double and triple check everything that goes out with our name on it. And most of us start working in a dispensary. So we know that we have this kind of almost paranoia and this real anxiety around making sure that everything we do is correct, because these aren't sweets that we're dealing out. This is medication, and people can and have died from medication errors. And so there's a real fear that, my God, I don't want to hurt somebody. I don't want to inadvertently kill someone because I haven't done my job properly. And so what that means is that because we feel that everything has to be accurate, it gives us this real, sense of perfectionism. Everything has to be accurate. Everything has to be perfect. And that's fine when it's just at work. It's bad enough when you're dealing with this at work. But for the majority of us, it spills over into our personal lives. And so we start to feel that we have to be perfect at everything. And we start to have these really punishing high standards of ourselves and of other people, because we always have to be perfect. And so when other people don't meet the high standards that we have, we get quite frustrated, and sometimes we can end up taking on their work because we think, you know what, I'll just do it myself. It's quicker, it's easier, I'll know it'll be accurate, so I'll just do it myself, increasing our own anxiety and stress levels in the bargain. When we ourselves don't meet our own punishing high standards, we really beat ourselves up. Oh, I should have done this, and why haven't I done that? And so we really use that as a stick to beat ourselves with, which of course gives us more stress. Add to that as pharmacists, we put the needs of others before ourselves. We are in a caregiving profession. And so what that means is that we become people pleasers. We don't like saying no to people. We want to put their needs before our own. And so we then have to struggle with this huge amount of guilt of letting other people down. And what I'm finding in the clients that I'm working with, and certainly me as well, is that we look for that validation from other people for giving us reassurance and confidence in what we're doing, and that what we're doing is right. Rather than having that confidence within us, we look to other people to give us that. And if we don't get that, that again gives us another stick to beat ourselves up with. And so we're walking around with this huge big ball of stress and anxiety because of these things. And this isn't just some people. This literally is everybody I work with. There's so many pharmacists that walk around with this much, sort of stress and anxiety. And I'm just going to add very quickly here, we also deal with this thing called high functioning anxiety, which, if you look this up, this was absolutely me 5 years ago, whereby some of us, we work better when we're under pressure. We need a little bit of anxiety in order to fuel our success and to drive us. So we've got all this anxiety that comes from the profession. As we get older, we get more and more roles and responsibilities in our personal lives that gives us stress and anxiety. And then we actually give ourselves stress and anxiety because it makes us perform at work. So is it any wonder that we're all walking around struggling with anxiety? It's not at all. Your recent survey results prove that that people are struggling with this. And so you asked me what we can do about it. And I know that Jamie and Jill are going to give some sort of individual tips of what we can do. I'm sort of looking at this as a sector-wide problem. And I think the thing that we can do is just first stop. A lot of us keep ourselves distracted, right? Because we're anxious, we don't like stopping and thinking about what's going on for us. It makes us feel very uncomfortable. And so we just continue and keep ourselves distracted and busy. So the first thing that I would say is stop, and become aware of what you're doing and what it's doing to you and the impact that it's having. And it is possible, because I've done this and I now help others do this. So it is possible to start to change the way that you're thinking and what you're doing, and start to remove some of this stress and anxiety. And I'll refer to my colleagues who I'm sure will give some great tips on this. But that's my biggest piece of advice, is don't continue doing what you've always been doing. Stop, take stock, look at what you're doing, look at the impact that it's having, and start to put some changes in that we can start to turn some of this around.
That's great. Thank you very much, Harpreet. And Danielle, are you getting these types of inquiries at the charity around anxiety? And what support do you have available to help anyone who's feeling anxious or struggling to manage their anxiety?
Yeah, so obviously everyone gets anxious, as we've just talked about. It's a natural human response, and it's common to experience anxiety when we are in a stressful situation or we're dealing with change. So it's probably unsurprising to hear that we have seen an increase in inquiries over the past year, because people have dealt with a lot of change. You know, we've had increasing workloads, we've had to deal with change quite a lot. It's been a difficult place to work in pharmacy. You know, we've had to deal with things that people haven't had to deal with in the previous year. So obviously anxiety is a common topic for us, but it has increased over the last year. Normally at the charity, we get kind of two forms of inquiry around anxiety. We get inquiries from working pharmacists. So, I mean, Harpreet's just described it perfectly, and that's the situation kind of we're faced with. We get people calling us up where their anxiety has increased so much, they're triple checking everything to the point where, you know, it's slowing down and prescriptions leaving a dispensary because they feel they need to check it and check it and check it because this anxiety is built. Coupled with all the other anxieties Harpreet's just mentioned, you know, family life and all the other things we've had to deal with, we often get working pharmacists calling us and just sort of saying, it feels too much at the moment, what can I do? We also get calls from people who are studying, because that's a stressful time as well, those at university, and then the trainee year is particularly difficult. Pre-registration trainees, as I've mentioned lots of time on these Facebook Lives, do disproportionately call us. We get a high number of inquiries from this group, and that's because it is stressful. So, I mean, in May, we carried out a survey with the BPSA because we were really conscious of this group, particularly because there was a lot of change for them as well. There'd been a lot of focus on working pharmacists, rightly. But we wanted to reach out to this group because for students in particular, you know, some people had just started university and all of a sudden we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and there's lots of worries. So from that survey, I mean, 650 people responded, which was quite a high number because it wasn't out for very long. And 66% of those people said they felt anxious, which is a really high amount. And 70% of those people said they were just really worried about the situation in terms of family and friends. And 66% of those people said the biggest worry for them was around what might happen to my degree. Will this impact me? What about my future career? You know, I had it all planned out and all of a sudden it's all up in the air and it's not what I expected. I mean, historically, we've always seen a spike of anxiety related inquiries around the assessment time, which is probably really unsurprising. But currently that's the situation we're in. And I think with the March assessment coming up, obviously there's that usual anxiety, but because of the changes and the changes to how this assessment's running, we have seen a huge increase again. So we will be launching a resource on our website this week, because what we've noticed is there's a huge amount of support out there across the profession, but we just want to pull that together so people are really clear if they are feeling anxious of where to go for that support. I mean, if we look at kind of a broader support available for anxiety, I mean, I think it's really important to say that most cases of anxiety can be managed if you understand them and you can recognise the symptoms, and then you can put your own coping mechanisms in place. And to do that, I think you need to understand a little bit about anxiety. And there's lots of great resources out there. I mean, we've got our Wellbeing hub, and on there you can kind of do self-learning modules. You can read about anxiety. We signpost to other charities. So I think that's a really good first step, because I think when you know about it a little bit more, you can see things that you can do, because there's some really simple things you can do to kind of support and kind of reduce those feelings of anxiety that we all talk about, but we're all not always great at doing. So just simple things, you know, focusing on our well-being. If you're feeling particularly anxious, taking that time, practicing some relaxation techniques. We talked about mindfulness on this Facebook Live before, and we've got tips about that on our Wellbeing Hub. Things like that can really help. I mean, and just general things like looking after ourselves. So a healthy diet, exercise. It's really easy when you're feeling quite stressed and anxious to do all the bad things. So you might increase alcohol intake and things like that. And you don't always plan in to kind of go for exercise. It's easy to kind of ring for a takeaway, but those things actually don't help. So just being mindful of that. I mean, there's lots of things available in our Wellbeing Hub, and I would urge people to have a little look at that. And we do signpost out. But I would also say, and you touched on this at the beginning, Heidi, if it becomes unmanageable, so if you feel like it's becoming a greater feeling that you're worried every day and you can feel it building, I think you do need to reach out quite quickly to your GP. You know, they might diagnose anxiety disorder and you can get increased help for that. There's also other organisations and charities that can help, so you can look on Anxiety UK, Mind, Mental Health Foundation. They're really great places to go for resources. Internally for us, a great way is to sometimes talk about what's worrying you. So we do have our Listening Friends service. So that just provides a listening ear. It's fully confidential. So if you are feeling anxious or worried, we do have that service available as well.
Thanks, Danielle. That's really comprehensive and a lot of good tips and links to resources there. So I'm going to move on now to Jamie, and hopefully you can talk a little bit about what role coaching plays in reducing anxiety.
Yeah, thanks Heidi and Danielle and Harpreet. They're both great and applaud it all. I think when people come to me for coaching and they realise they're in a safe, confidential space, they emotionally vomit all over me, because that's what people have got going on with them. And Danielle just mentioned the listening. I got this from a BMJ podcast last week. Give somebody a damn good listening to, and that can be an enormous help. We're getting better at listening, but we're still trying to fix people as well. And so when people listen, our immediate reaction, because as Harpreet said, we're in a caring profession, our instinct is to try in and start fixing people as well. And so the coaching is about really deep, active listening. And again, when people realize they're in that safe, confidential space, it all comes out. So that self-awareness that Harpreet mentioned, I think, is really important. Actually understanding that you do need to stop. And so that's a huge part of it. So coaching it's not counseling and it's not therapy. Coaching conversation should be fairly frequent and future orientated. And so that's a big part of seeing people through the tough time. The other bit I wanted to mention is, and I do this with people when we chat about performance, and from the sporting world now, recovery is as important as the training. It is such a crucial aspect. And I would urge the people on the call today or watching this on catch up to treat recovery as a new essential skill. And it's a skill that we have to learn and that we have to practice. And you know, to begin with, we'll be apprenticeship, and then we will get to sort of a mastery level. But it is something that you do need to apply yourselves and really treat seriously, because as Harpreet mentioned right at the start, without, you know, we don't have a workforce if we can't learn these skills. And so to treat recovery as such an important aspect of performance. So I'll set a challenge to people. Look, you know, the clocks go forward on March the 28th. So there's 3 or 4 weeks between now and then. With some of these things that we're doing, and we mentioned exercise and sleep and nutrition, the basics, going for walks. With a lot of the medicines that the people watching this live feed, a lot of the medicines we give every day, we're talking about numbers needed to treat of what? 15, 20, 30, 50. Yeah, we need to treat 35 patients every day for a year to get a good outcome. And I would urge the people that what works for them, find out if it's exercise, nutrition, sleep, improving these things, and give it a chance. Don't give it 1 or 2 days and say, well, that didn't, walking around the block during lunch, that didn't work. Or walking to work, or, all these little micro habits that we can sort of share with each other. Give it a fair chance. That would be my recommendation, because with the medicines we're giving out, we've got a different level expectation. Okay.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Jamie. And yeah, I like that focus on recovery. It's very important for all of us. So Jill, how do you help patients and clients understand and manage their anxiety?
I suppose the one main thing I do to help patients and clients, and I would say myself in that, is primarily I help them change the story they're telling themselves from, an old story, which is, anxiety's got control of me, to, do you know what, I'm in control of my anxious feelings. So immediately dissociating yourself from having anxiety to actually having temporary anxious feelings. And one of the things I do is I always take kind of a two-pronged approach to anxiety. That's having a long-term strategy and a short-term solution. And one of the easiest ways I find to describe it to patients and even to work with clients, and when I'm talking to groups of people, is to think about asthma. Because we're all aware, asthma, you've got your long-term strategy of your brown inhaler, your preventer, which you practice taking daily, and it becomes a habit, and it kind of keeps your asthma well managed. And then you have a short-term solution, which is your blue kind of reliever inhaler, which when things get a bit tough, there's a bit more kind of stuff around, you might need that, and that quick puff of the blue inhaler can kind of relieve that in the moment situation. And we know that the patients that have the greatest and the most managed and effective asthma plan are the ones that kind of stick to daily brown inhaler and very infrequently using their blue inhaler. So I suppose I take the same approach to anxiety. So what is a long-term strategy and what could be a short-term solution? And I'll quickly just share one little example. And like Harpreet, I could probably talk about this for a whole day, but I'm going to give you one little example for each. So a long-term strategy is something I can share with you today. It's something I use myself, and it's all about changing my story, what I'm telling myself, my thoughts, which leads to my feelings, which lead to my actions. And that is my 1-2-1 time. My 1-2-1 time. And that is either every night or every morning, I record the one thought I want to let go of, the 2 things that I'm grateful or appreciate that day, and the last one is the one thing I want to do that day. I tend to do it in the morning, and certainly in preparation for this, I went and looked back last year's journal, and I found an entry on in April, and it was all around managing COVID. And looking at it now as a pharmacist, where I am now, it's fascinating to see how I've moved forward and how we've moved forward as a profession as well. So that would be a long-term strategy, which is practicing daily that habit of just recording 1-2-1, one thought you want to let go of, 2 things you're grateful or appreciate, and 1 thing you want to achieve that day. And the more you do that, the more you start to change your thinking and focus on what you can do. The short-term solution, I would actually describe that as a short-term superpower, because we all have the superpower that we're kind of unaware of, and it is just so powerful. And in describing it today, I think, have we got time? Yes, we do. I'd like to just introduce a little bit of audience participation with my fellow speakers. So if I could ask everybody just to kind of lift their hands up like this, because I want to demonstrate the superpower that we all have. Come on, Jamie, there we go. We're all sitting like this. So basically, as we're looking at each other right now, we're probably feeling a little bit silly, but this is the whole purpose, because when we introduce humour and fun, that also is another solution to alleviating anxiety as well. But basically what we're sitting here with is our pause up, our pause, because our superpower that we all have is the power of pause. As Harpreet said, it's just a different way of saying actually stopping. the power of the pause. Now, in the pharmacy that I used to work in, my technician used to do this to me, particularly about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and she just used to come up to me like this, and I knew what I needed to do. We can take our hands down now, guys. Okay. So the power of the pause is so important. And as soon as you have an awareness that kind of level, as soon as we have an awareness that we should be using our blue inhaler, either mentally, actually physically, lift up the hands and pause, and then do something that involves your physiology. So moving away, I go and sit in the loo and I breathe in for 4, hold for 4, and out for 4. Repeat that 3 times. Or it could be a walk around the car park. It could be kind of running on the spot in the dispensing. Anything that's impacting on your physiology, because that will change your state. So I know that's very quick and very rushed, but the main message I want to get over, you can take control of your asthma if you tell yourself the story that you can take control. And a long-term strategy, which is practiced daily, like journaling the 1-to-1, can start to change the way you think. And a short-term solution, like remembering about your superpower, sharing it with others, and doing something that changes your physiology in that moment, can change your state and allow you to manage that anxiety and take control.
That's great. Thanks, Jill. And that's going to be one I'm going to remember. So just before we finish, I'm going to whiz round to everybody. And I know you've kind of given some tips already, Jill, but just going to ask you all, what would be your top tip to managing anxiety? I'm going to do it in reverse order from the speakers. So I'm going to start with you, Jill. What would be your top tip?
I would just echo what I said. For me, it's actually recording daily some sort of form of journaling. And I use the 1-to-1 process a lot, and sometimes change the things around, but I always start with the one thing I want to get rid of, or the one thing that's frustrating me. Get that out there. It's better out than in, out of your head, down into paper. And definitely the power of the pause and doing some dancing up and down.
Fantastic, thank you. Jamie?
I enjoy it as a challenge and treat it as a challenge, and do the basics, the exercise, the sleep, the nutrition, and the connectedness. And if you think you haven't got time for those, then make time for illness.
Yeah, good point. Okay, Danielle?
I think for me, it's just about taking control and planning in time for yourself, really. I always plan in a daily walk now, and I know I need better. So it's about making time for yourself and learning to say no. If you're feeling overwhelmed, don't be frightened to say no.
Thanks, Danielle. And a lot has obviously already been covered, but Harpreet, over to you.
Mine hasn't actually, so I'm pleased that it hasn't. Danielle sort of touched on it a little bit, which doesn't surprise me because we think alike on these things. But it is about making time for yourself, but I do it at a different time of day. Now, it will depend on your own setup and sort of when you need this, but it comes back to that. It comes back to Jill's pause. But actually taking that pause out for yourself. And I do it first thing in the morning. And it's something I've only done since we went into lockdown a year ago. I never used to do this because I used to commute into London from where I live, and it was quite a big commute. So I was up at sort of, 5:30 anyway. But what I've started to do, I wake up before the house wakes up, and I just have some time to myself. Now I need it. I can't get through the day without just that, even if it's just 15 minutes of just peace, where I'm not thinking about anything, where I'm not doing anything. Sometimes I'll have a cup of tea, sometimes I just sit in silence. And I just stop and I think about, and you can think about anything really, but because we're so used to having our phones with us, we're so used to being constantly switched on, just taking 10, 15 minutes just to sit in silence and let just be whatever you're feeling, let it wash over you. And if it is uncomfortable and it's making you feel uncomfortable, let it come. And actually ask yourself, how am I feeling today? I'm feeling a bit anxious. What am I feeling anxious over? Oh, this is happening today. Okay, well, how much of this can I actually control, and how much of this can I actually change? Actually, not a huge amount of it. So why am I worrying about this? So it's not just the pause, it's the self-inquiry. And that's where the real change starts to happen. So what I was talking about in terms of stopping and taking stock, it's then about inquiring about yourself in terms of what you're thinking and how you're thinking it. And so I know that for pharmacists, because we're perfectionists, we like to do everything perfectly. So we think that a journal is something we have to write in every single day, and it's got to be Dear Diary and everything else. No, It doesn't. A journal can be something, it's just a notepad, and you can write 1 line and you can write 100 lines. It's just whatever's going on for you. And so I would encourage everybody, take a bit of time out, whether it's the start of the day like me or at the end of the day, just for yourself, that 10 minutes, and check in with yourself. How am I feeling today? What's genuinely going on for me? And start writing it, because you'll find as you're writing it and processing it, you can then start to let go of it, and you just watch those anxiety levels start to fall.
Fantastic, thank you. And thank you all for today. It's really been great talking to all of you. And thanks for sharing your experiences, your thoughts and your views with us today. So for everyone who's listening, I hope you can take at least one thing away from today's session and put it into practice either at home or where you work. So just to let you know, we've got one more workshop on time management with pharmacist support next week. That's on the 11th of March. And then we're looking at more events for Q2 of this year, and we'll get those up on the website once we've got confirmed dates for those. So if you'd like to get more involved in helping RPS to shape and influence the work we're doing around the workforce wellbeing agenda, then do please sign up to the Workforce Wellbeing Action Group. The link to this will be posted in the chat. We've got our first meeting of the action group on the 25th of March in the evening, so I do hope you can join us for that. So thanks again, everyone, for your time today, and look forward to seeing you again soon.